Hey everyone, a couple of quick things before we get started. If you're not familiar with this week's topic work, Bitch Planet, we want to issue a trigger warning for issue 6 of that series. And in fact, the issue itself does carry a trigger warning. It is a flashback issue which deals with the implied sexual abuse of a minor. And it's not necessary for your understanding of the story. So if that is something that you foresee yourself having difficulty with, we recommend that you skip that issue and continue on with the rest of the series. Announcement number 2 is that Emerald City Comic Con is going to be happening in 2 weeks' time, the week of April 7th through the 10th in Seattle, Washington. And we're going to be there. We'll be roaming the con floor all weekend. So if you see us, we'd love it if you'd say hello. And we're going to be having a informal fan meetup on Saturday, April 9th at 3 p.m. just outside the atrium, which you'll be able to find on your maps. If you'd like to show up, we're going to be hanging out there for about half an hour, and we'd love to say hi, pal around, maybe record a little bit, and, just kind of say thank you to any listeners who are interested in checking that out. So hopefully we will see some of you there. And as always, we'll be doing our con report after action thing. So with that, we'll let you go on to episode 160 of View from the Gutters. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book club podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel. Warning, this podcast contains massive spoilers for its topic work. On this week's episode, we discuss Bitch Planet by Kelly Sue Deconnick, Valentine Landro, Taki Soma, Robert Wilson IV, and Kelly Fitzpatrick. Thank you to all of our Patreon sponsors for contributing to the show. And a special thank you to this week's episode sponsor, Cris and Cooley. Welcome to View from the Gutters, episode 160. I'm Tobiah Panchin.
Brant Gillihan Eddy.
I'm Kaylee Fleeman.
I'm Kit DeForge.
And I'm Kid Reynolds.
And we're talking about lady planets.
We can just say Bitch Planet. It's fine.
Okay, we're talking about Bitch Planet.
When it's a proper noun, it's appropriate, right? Is that how that works?
Well, also because you get to proudly own being called a bitch as a woman.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I'm allowed to proudly own that.
But you could.
I mean, I could, I guess.
My friend
it has, like, weird...
a bitch. My friend says that they're fine with it.
Yeah.
So
there you go. I have a friend who's a bitch, so
yeah,
I think I'm fine with all bitches.
Totally fine with being a bitch, yeah. So,
it's okay. They basically gave me a bitch card anyway. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm in.
I have my bitch
outline. I have access to a laminating machine.
I don't need it laminated.
If
Do you think I already
lose my
don't
man card enough times, does that mean I can get a bitch card?
No.
Oh.
Unfortunately, in this gendered society of ours, the male bitch card is not the same as the lady bitch card.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Plus, that would be
completely different kinds of bitches.
Yeah. Well, it's completely different, system.
Ours smells baby powder fresh, is my understanding. Yeah. Like a spring morning.
Yeah. Also covered in blood.
That too.
Mm-hmm.
Iron and a spring baby.
Yeah. So good.
Wait. I think you cut off a couple of other pieces of those descriptions, and now we've just got iron and spring baby.
That's how we get the blood.
Okay. Iron and spring baby. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Kaylee, this is your pick. This is something that you have been very eager to talk about for a long time.
Very long time.
This book has been pitched at least 3 or 4 times, I think, since it started coming out. And for a comic that only has 7 issues, that's pretty impressive.
Yep.
Really? I don't think I've been here for any of those.
I don't think so, because I feel like it would have been voted for if you had been. But
why? What do you mean?
Whatever, because I mean. So Bitch Planet is written by Kelly Sue Deconnick. Most of the art is done by Valentine Landro. There are a couple of guest issues with different artists. Colors are done by Cris Peter, and letters are done by Clayton Cowles. This is basically an exploration of exploitation and blaxploitation films. And the very common threads that tend to come up in those. And more importantly, discussing the problematic aspects of that. So in this book, women who are labeled non-compliant, i.e. too religious, too meek, too forward, too skinny, too fat, too whatever for male tastes, are shipped off to this planet called Bitch Planet. Of course, it has its own official name and whatever, but nobody calls it that. There's really no... You really don't come back from it, even though there's kind of this idea of like, sure, if you're rehabilitated, maybe you could come back. That never happens. These women are deemed to be beyond hope. And it is important not only for the women who are on this planet who have been deemed beyond hope, but it is also an important tool to keep women who are on the main planet in compliance, because it keeps them scared. So what I appreciate about this book is that it's not feminism 101. At this point, you go beyond kind of the feminism that you introduce in a lot of other comics that we've been reading recently, which are great and they're important. But Bitch Planet is for those who already identify as feminist, who already say like, yeah, women's issues. And then it kind of punches them in the face and says, well, why the fuck aren't you doing more? Like, you need to wake up. You need to look at this. Like, why the fuck is your feminism not intersectional? Why aren't you talking about trans issues? Why aren't you talking about queer issues? Why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you talking about that? So this comic is important because it's an exploration into that and is a wake-up call for, I think, neoliberals, as a lot of people refer to them, where it's just kind of this quiet, easygoing, like, sure, equal rights for all, but I'm never going to do anything to really further that discussion. So it's important.
I hate to jump out with a contradiction, but I came at it from a little bit of a different perspective in that I don't see it as necessarily posing those questions or posing questions generally, because I think that there is I don't know if tendency is the right word, but when somebody is like, hey, here's a bunch of questions that you should be thinking about, like, it can come off as very preachy. And this doesn't come off as preachy to me. What I saw it as someone saying, this is a thing. This is real. Look at this. The things that you are seeing here might be happening on another planet in this story, but they're happening here today in real life too.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Well, and I think that the questions arise from what the reader has to ask themselves.
Exactly. And you have to ask yourself those questions. And I think that is a much more powerful storytelling mechanism. And I think it's one of the things that's so absolutely great about this series. Mm-hmm. Is that it's not necessarily posing questions, but it's begging you to ask those questions of yourself. Yeah. And I think it's very hard not to ask yourself questions like those when it's presented in this very blunt, very real way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to read this and not come out feeling like dirty because you're not doing things, or because certain things kind of fell to the wayside in activist circles or whatever, and so it forces you to reflect upon that, and I think that's hugely important.
I feel like, it may not be. I think you're right. It's certainly not. I agree that I do not believe the book is feminism 101. I think it might be intersectionality feminism 101 though, mm-hmm. in a certain sense, and I think that, I feel pretty much like I know that there are folks who maybe didn't even identify with those things intellectually or politically or experientially, who did get brought into this because of its exploitation background. Mm-hmm. So I think that there is the potential that there are readers who saw the covers, don't really necessarily know much about Kelly Sue DeConnick except she's a name, knows that it looks like a 70s grindhouse style film, mm-hmm. and started reading it, and then got to the essays and the letters and all that stuff and was like, oh, This is more than it appears. And I think, again, I agree with Toby in the sense that I think that that's actually more powerful. That it does say all those things on the cover that are provocative, and if you kind of know the language or know the concepts involved, you're like, oh yeah, she's calling it out. Mm-hmm. But you could be somebody who's kind of like, 70s movies about like chicks in prisons is awesome, and then be like, I'm going to read this and be like, oh. Crazy.
Well, it's funny because when it first started coming out after the first issue, you had a lot of like fedora tipping neckbeards that were like, what the fuck is this? I thought I was reading like super cool Grindhouse book, and now it's just like all these essays about feminism. I don't understand this. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, oh, because that's the point of it.
Yeah, it's supposed to challenge your expectations. Mm-hmm. Cade, you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, sorry. That was an amazing impression of neckbeards. No, I was going to ask what exactly is intersectional feminism?
So, well, actually, you were looking at me, but does somebody else want to take that?
Well, no, I was looking at you because I'm.
No, I know you're
right
facing me.
Mic.
No, I know.
Yeah. So glad you asked that. Intersectional feminism is the idea that the feminism that we see most of the time is targeted toward issues that affect perhaps middle-class white women or things like that, or favors and prioritizes the needs and struggles of what I might call a majority female group. Intersectional feminism is the idea that in order for a real progression to occur in the feminist landscape, you need to bring the others into the conversation. And I say the others specifically because of our tendency to other people who are not white, not skinny, not straight, things like that, is that intersectional feminism makes sure that it furthers the agendas and moves forward the needs of women who are people of color, women who are queer, trans community as well involved in that, and the general idea that we have to consider multiple sort of backgrounds and perspectives in our feminism. So feminism isn't just for well-off white women. That your feminism should consider the struggles of women who are low-wage earners, women who are, say, queer, and the opportunities afforded them because of their position and their life experience. So the feminist issues that face, say, a black woman are not going to be the same issues that face a white woman. It comes with a whole different set of things that work together to make her struggles different from a white woman. So when we talk about feminism, it's important to make sure that you're including all women's experiences and not just a general idea of women, if that makes any sense. Kaylee, I think you probably have something better.
Well, you did a pretty excellent job of summing it up. I'm very impressed. Good job. Gold star when we get home.
All right. On the fridge.
It's intersectional feminism it's kind of the difference between, I want to say, was it second wave feminism and third wave feminism? Second wave feminism, or fourth, I don't know whatever.
Sorry, I'm like making hand signals to Kaylee. I think it's third and fourth wave, but it doesn't matter.
We're on some wave of feminism now. It's kind of the difference right now between the older feminists who are currently saying, well, why aren't you voting for Hillary? You're not a feminist if you don't vote for Hillary.
Yes. Where
the queer and black community is saying, no, we're voting for Bernie because he supports us. And like that's a huge issue in that. And so intersectional feminism is this idea of a white woman trying to further her way in like a corporate world, trying to balance being a stay-at-home mom versus like being employed, things like that, versus the idea of a black woman who is, I think, 4 times more likely to be incarcerated, something like that, by the time that she is 18 than a white woman. So intersectional feminism is this idea that feminism is great, but if you aren't including everybody, it's not getting the job done.
My understanding is that essentially there was this idea that womanhood was something that was universal and that feminism should represent this universal idea of empowered womanhood. And that a lot of people came back and said, well, no, because your idea of what universal womanhood is necessarily limited, that there are women who are black, there are women who are gay, there are women who are trans, there are women who are all of these things, and that they exist at the intersection of all of these elements that make up themselves, and they are inseparable from all of those elements. So the experience of a black woman versus a gay Latino woman are never going to be identical, and that you have to understand all of the different challenges that different kinds of women face and have a feminism that represents all of those different needs.
It's also the fact that when these people struggle that are not like you, we may not directly suffer so much from the things that happen to them, but not considering their struggles in that will cause a greater decline for everyone too. I think about when we talk about votes for women and things like that, and the whole suffragette movement, how much of that stuff kind of was dependent on this idea that we want these things, but we have to make concessions. And so feminists like to talk about, the suffragette movement in this brave sort of way. Intersectional feminists will be the people that acknowledge and point out, yeah, you white women got to vote at this time. You got what you got because you fucked over these black women. That instead of including them in your fight, people who fought for you, people who helped further these agendas for you, you turned around and threw them under the bus. You did not support these people who needed your support as well. And one of the benefits of intersectional feminism is really you have more soldiers for your cause. You have more people to consider than just yourself. And I think that it's critical that if you want to do any sort of social change of that type, empathy is important, like for more than just people like you. Because if you can make a dent, that's fine. But if you can change the entire structure of something, that's better. Mm-hmm. Everyone will essentially benefit from that.
Okay, thanks.
That helpful?
No, absolutely. I'm learning a lot here.
Okay, cool.
No, and I'm also thinking about it in the context of this book, and thinking about the different struggles that the women in the book are facing, or that brought them to this.
Yeah, well, why don't you talk about the book a little bit? Since it seems like you're kind of coming into this from the position of least knowledge regarding the specifically feminist issues that this kind of raises. What was your experience with this as a story and as a piece of artwork?
I really liked it. I'm excited to see where it's going. There were a couple things I wish had been addressed earlier on. More of the world building aspects. But at the same time, I often give books crap for too much exposition and world building at the beginning. I like it spread out over time, but I wanted to know what happened, like what exactly made this world completely backwards from our own. Now, that is looking at it as a viewpoint. Like when I look at a dystopian work, you can trace it back to one or two key things that happened in the past that basically altered the timeline.
Sure. We talked about this a long time ago in relation to science fiction, this idea that you make one small change and then examine the ramifications from that.
Exactly. And I wanted to know what that one change was, and they didn't really get to it. So I'm excited to be learning more about the world, and I think that it was like at the end of issue 4 or partway through issue 5, they started touching more on that, and that's what I'm excited about. It was something that Eric Mannix and I have talked about on a previous episode, where we love like historical fiction or the
like alternate universe stuff.
Yeah,
like,
alternate history.
It's set in the Civil War, but it's a Civil War where George Washington had robot dinosaurs.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of this Harry Turtledove novel where it's in World War II and we're at war with Hitler, and all of a sudden aliens attack. And it's like, oh shit, Hitler, we need to put our differences aside and fight these aliens.
Actually, that sounds really cool.
So, it's like, and the TV show Sliders I bring up a lot. I love that show, not because it's an excellent TV show, because let's be honest, it's not, but because of the imagination that it can spark in your head. Like, when they go to a world where instead of women never voting, it's men who never got to vote. Women rule the world, because like, the whole thing where like, yeah, a woman's, a cycle comes every 28 days, but a man's comes every 4 hours. So they're even less stable than a woman, that kind of thing. Like, you start looking at that and you start thinking about things and your imagination just goes crazy. And I like that. I like that a lot. And so that aspect of this book really, really excited me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kit.
Okay. I think in regard to the big event mindset, I guess, for these kind of things with science fiction, what interests me the most about this book is that I can point to several events that could, in theory, but they depend on each other, I guess, as a systematic thing, and they're all happening now. They have all been happening for the past 30 fucking years, 40 fucking years. Beyond that, with just the general mindset of misogyny that we still have not gotten past. It's the same kind of thing as with the Black Lives Matter movement, is this idea that, Black people can vote. They can go to the same schools. So we're completely done needing to help take care. Yeah, see, so racism is over. Yay. It's the same kind of dangerous thing that happens when it comes to women's rights issues, is this idea that we can vote. We can own property. That means we're equal, right? But there are so many things actively that maybe have been passed, or things that they are still toying with now. That just because we may have passed some rights for women doesn't mean there aren't still fuckers out there that keep trying to fuck with them. Like, there are still assholes on a state-to-state level that want to take away the right to a safe abortion. Well, Roe versus Wade, decades ago, does not change a fucking thing.
They'll keep doing it
for these people. Yeah. They will keep doing this because you're pulling out a weed with these issues. You constantly pull out a weed. It keeps coming back. Maybe the problem is what's feeding its roots. Maybe the reason it keeps being a problem is because we don't change the environment. And that's what fascinates me about this storyline, is that most, if not all, of the things that I have read that are issues that are raised in this book, or sidelong comments or things like that, are things women do and are constantly facing. And Kaylee had kind of brought that up. What fascinates me is that I don't feel this one is dependent on a single given thing having happened to make this world a real world.
Mm-hmm. So because you're saying that this is a glimpse of our future and not an alternate time, an alternate.
I'm not sure it's necessarily I get what you mean. Not perhaps so exact and literal as a unavoidable future per se, but it is a reflection, I think, upon the way women face these issues, the way feminists face these issues on a regular basis. That this is never just a fight that is won and a trophy that is stuck on a shelf. This is a constant tug of rope war, and we've never stopped fighting it. It's just we have more on our side this time.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that some asshole isn't going to come along and say, well, I want to revoke your right to safe abortion. We need to put stricter restrictions on birth control. Mm-hmm. We need to not cover mammograms. We need to not cover pap smears and things like that in women's health, because preventative care is not important, because women's bodies are not important unless we're using them. And the fact that there are people that will agree with that shows how diseased and sick the soil already is and has been and will continue to be until we till that shit, until we turn it over, until we bring something else in. And I love that about this book, is that when Kelly Sue is playing with some of these things, there is both a bit of playing for her world and a bit of admitting to the one she has.
Yeah.
That she can only play with these things the way she does because she understands the way they already are.
Yeah, it's not so far of a leap, really. It's more of a mirror of what our society kind of already is. And the idea of women being compliant is a huge issue, because for incarceration, if a woman gets out of hand with a cop or something, she's going to go to jail.
Yeah.
But if you kind of bat your eyes at the cop and play nice, play sweet, probably going to get off. And so it's this issue, or not even with cops, with men on the street who catcall you.
If you smile, somebody attacks you.
Yeah. Yeah, if you smile and
feel
snicker
dirty for the next half hour.
Yeah. You smile and snicker, and they'll leave you alone because they feel like they've been able to force their presence upon you enough. Or if you tell them to fuck off, they'll attack you.
Or follow you. Yep. Or intimidate you. Or, any of those other things. Or just verbally assault you for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's less about one big change or a major difference, and more about taking that which is covert within our society and making it overt. Taking the things that are implied and just setting them right there on the table and going, look at that. That is a thing that happens all the time. Penny Roll, the scene where the orphanage or juvenile delinquent hall woman, or whatever her role is exactly, is straightening her hair and pulling out that hair straightener. And this is something that a lot of black women deal with, being told that their natural hair is unprofessional, unfit for society, ugly, and that they need to go through expensive, often very painful procedures to fix it.
Mm-hmm. But if you do that, you're a vain woman.
Yep.
Yeah. If you fix your hair, you're wasting your money. And by the way, as a black woman, you must clearly be impoverished and everything else. And spending your money on that is wasteful, vain, selfish, stupid, inconsiderate.
And yet it's the only way to get a job.
Yes.
Yep.
But see, when you get that job,
then you're fake, because you're not representing yourself.
God, I can't remember where it was, but I was seeing something just recently where somebody took a classical statue of a woman in this very elegant kind of twisty pose, and it was called Beauty or something like that. Mm-hmm. They put an iPhone in their hand, so it looks like they were taking a selfie, and retitled it Vanity.
Yeah. And that's a huge issue. It's that women are supposed to be for consumption, not just primarily male consumption. And that's kind of this important thing that gets brought up in the book. Women are meant to be consumed by each other. They're supposed to be palatable for others for their mothers, for their daughters, for their sisters, for teachers, for nuns, for
Even
all of these things.
For the competitiveness of the dating game.
Yeah, well, and
you want to look, you need to look better than every other woman in the bar.
But not even that, because if you do look better than all the women in the bar, then you're a slut.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look. So it's that issue of you need to be palatable.
So if you're pretty, you can't say so.
Yeah.
If you're proud of yourself, you can't say so.
Yeah.
You have to always find a way to kind of shyly lie.
You have to diminish yourself.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Well, it's not a game to be won. It's a system of control.
And that's the thing with why I think single event world building for this wouldn't work, is because no single event in the course of social justice struggle and feminism could change or fix all of the circumstances of women in one fell swoop.
Mm-hmm.
There is no single solution right now that would fix and change things for everyone, because it is way more complicated than just, let's pass a law that says that you have to respect women, period.
Right.
Like, that's not something that can happen, and it's because there's always going to be people that, again, we found this country and we say we want this country to be a country with freedom of religion, right to own property, things like that. The only way that can happen is if a bunch of people say, what was the Mel Brooks thing? We'll invite everyone. We'll let everyone come, but not the Irish.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, basically, where somebody's got to take the shaft for some people to get ahead. And so much of this mindset is ingrained in how we change law or how we, quote, fix things, that even the idea of a universal empathy and fairness is too far afield for people. Like the Bernie Sanders campaign.
Right. And
it's too much.
The easiest way to build a community is to make another.
Yes.
Is if you out somebody and you say, oh, not them, fuck those guys, then everybody else who wasn't excluded goes, well, I'm treated like shit in this community, but at least I'm not them.
Yes.
And that's important. I think that is something that is one of the core concepts of this work, is this idea of, well, you have all these bitches, all these NCs on Bitch Planet, and they are the other. And if you don't want to act right, then you will also be other. But if you at least pretend to follow the rules, you're fine. Everything's fine. Everything's great. And that is very much so what a lot of women are facing right now.
And what a lot of what we're taught is, same thing, is that as long as there is, in a lot of girls' social structures, especially when you're young, as long as there is a concept that there is that person that you do not like, there is that person that is not part of the group, as long as you collectively shit on that person, you're collectively shitting together.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that what you're doing is hurting someone else. What matters is that there are other people that agree with you, so that you're not them, at least not when they're around. Mm-hmm. And it just means that if you keep these fissures in place, it means that the entire structure is extremely shatterable. It leaves so many cracks, and that's the problem. That's a really good way, I guess, of explaining why intersectional feminism is so important, is that without including all of your fellow women, you've left a giant flaw. Yeah. You've left a giant weakness in everything.
You've built a house with no support beam. And it's like, walls might stay up for a while, but eventually it's gonna all come down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's not insignificant to note how all of the main character women are different sorts of people who are there for different reasons, up to and including the end of issue 7, when the guard, their former tormentor, is knocked down and she is now one amongst them because she fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you suddenly lose your position where she thought that she had all this power and all these rights, and that's just all fucking gone now.
Yep.
And that is something that can happen to anybody in a system like this. And I mean, you even see it amongst the men where they're jockeying for position, and you have the fathers up top who are looking very sternly down on their subordinates, not to get too cocky, not to get too friendly. That there are all of these systems of control, and they're all predicated on these concepts of fear.
Yeah. Which is
what could happen, what you could lose if you do or say or think the wrong thing.
It's important because intersectional feminism includes men. Meninists, you assholes. God.
That is a really good thing. I keep using this word women, and that's a big flaw on my part. That feminism that is effective is definitely going to raise all the boats.
Yep.
That if you have a boy in your life, for example, a little boy in your life that likes to play with trucks, but also likes an Elsa doll, you're creating a world for him of more empathy and understanding and sharing. You're creating a world where the things that mean things to him can just mean things to him, that he doesn't have to live as much in fear of judgment or in fear of punishment from his peers and other people. If you teach him that the things girls like aren't weaker or stupider or lesser than the things that boys like. And it's also creating a world where the girl that may want to play with that doll with him is not going to grow up 10 years later with the belief that she is lesser, that the things she cares about are boring, are less important than the things that her boyfriend has to talk about, or the things that he wants, or the things that she's told that she should want. And that opens up a world of options for her too.
I think one of the other things to keep in mind is that this is really messy, and it's kind of one of these things where it's a system of thought, intersectionality in general, you know, not just intersectional feminism, but all the different modes and manners and methods it's applied, that there is no such thing as a clean and swift answer. Like, one of the most interesting examples to me in the real life right now was that at the Game Developers Conference a few days ago, Microsoft held a after party, and there were women clad as schoolgirls dancing. And so then Microsoft apologized. There was a lot of really hard feelings that were being processed publicly about, you know, whether or not people felt like they were welcome at that event because it seemed so overtly sexual and male gaze oriented. But then one of the dancers who was there, who's also like a small business owner and a STEM advocate who runs a program for young women and all this stuff, moonlights as a go-go dancer because she likes go-go dancing and can make money doing it, and put up this really interesting article talking about how she has as many problematic interactions with women who try to diminish the fact that she's comfortable in her body, confident in her, you know, wants to express herself in these ways, and like how this is messy. Like, it's not this clean thing where people shouldn't just be like, this is good and this is bad. It's like, no, I mean, there are people who do want to do these things and do think it's okay. She's like, don't get me wrong, they had us dress in schoolgirl outfits. That's like sexualization of youth. That's probably pretty disgusting. But the fact that I like to dance should in no way make anybody think that I'm not, you know, especially if I'm being compensated appropriately, which is another part of this messy conversation. Like, doesn't make me less of a person because you don't even know what I do the rest of my time. Like, but that's where this gets really messy all the time. And that's what I like about this book, is that all this shit is messy. Like, even the guard who gets thrown into the thing, like there's echoes of kind of those stories that came out of the South about, you know, house slaves versus field slaves, and how some of them would kind of participate in the structure because they got more power and privilege out of it until they fucked up and then something bad happened to them. And like, she even says to the other person who's like interrogating her, she's like, nobody gives a shit if these ladies die. Like, no one's cared before. Why do they care now? But they just happen to. The rules change. Too bad to be you. Like, you know, like, It's not clean. And that's part of the way that the system destabilizes you is by constantly shifting the goalposts of what is appropriate or allowed.
Only tangentially related, there was a woman who died recently in Nevada. I think of like cancer or heart attack or something like that. She was relatively young, but she was a judge who had worked as a stripper to put herself through law school, graduated law school, become a lawyer, become a judge, been like very highly regarded, and then passed away. And then of course you had Fox News turning around, former stripper turned judge found dead in her home.
Like,
it's like you have to fucking lead with that,
right?
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yeah,
good for you. Good for her.
Anyway, I think that it is a noted strength of this work that we're spending so much time talking about the issues that it raises and less about specifically what the story is actually happening with the prisoners and the Megaton game and all of that stuff. But are there...
Oh, you mean rollerball?
Yeah. Is there anything there that we really want to talk about or chew over? Because I have some, I don't know, I guess questions that maybe I didn't necessarily get answered in my reading of it.
So I do want to ask one question real quick. You've seen Rollerball, the original.
No.
James Caan. Okay,
no.
Anybody else here?
Nope. Yeah.
All right. Yes. Yeah. That makes complete sense. Thank you. So there was a newer one made and it's complete crap. But 1976, 77, like there was this movie called Rollerball, dystopian future, and it's about oligarchy, right? There's like these super elite rich and they run the world. But it's okay because there's Rollerball where
you can squirtball yourself to fame and fortune.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like gladiators of old, those who are the best, can rise above. And, Rollerball is a game not only of skill, but of cunning. And like the greatest player is not only, brutal and effective, but he's a man's man, but he also rallies his troops, cares about people, is a sex god, like all this crap. But it is in of itself an exploitation film, but it's like a sports exploitation film. It's so funny to me that this book combines so many different types of that.
I think one of the blurbs on the back of the trade I had actually compared this to Rollerball.
Excellent. Everything should be compared to
The Longest Yard as well.
Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
Well, I mean, they're in prison, they're playing this football game.
Absolutely.
But there's like you said, though, there is an extremely long history of using the people below you for entertainment and promising them to rise in rank if they know how to play your game in the way you like it.
Right.
It's, for me, I think it's effective and interesting to have Megaton ball in this because you have a story within a story and you have a history behind that, in that sense that, again, women have to play the game. Women have to play this game all the time in their day-to-day lives of entertaining and pleasing everyone around them, and that you will rise in rank if you figure out how to be the best kind of woman in the best kind of way. And if you fuck up, everybody sees it. And nobody forgets it. If you stumble, people notice it. And this idea that you're always being watched is, again, a really common kind of feeling that you have to scrutinize your choices socially and in other ways. And you may not like them. I guess you may not like what you have to do, but you have to keep playing. And the option is out. There are so many stories. Like I think it's Theseus again. It's one of those where it's like a person in a point or in a position of disadvantage has to know how to keep, as you said before, bread in the circuses, keep everyone entertained, keep everyone on their side in order to advance or even survive in life. I think there's a reason that that's there. And a big part of that story is that we have that structure right now in the United States. Again, it's called football. Yep. It's called basketball. It's called baseball because, one of the only ways to advance in certain communities to wealth and privilege and notoriety, where you may already be on an equal playing field with your skills and not disadvantaged because of where you live or how much money the people in your district happen to have to spend on your education or who your parents are. One of those great equalizers is sports.
Yep.
And I think that's purposeful, and I think that's worth noting, is how many people can advance socially, financially, in sport.
Well, and it's important too then to reflect upon like how many young poor men go to college for football scholarships.
Yes.
Purely for football scholarships, and then they get injured.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lose that. Because the only important part is that they're able to sports better than other people can sport. And
to entertain.
Yep. It's all about entertaining. And so you have this issue where in Megaton as well, a player gets killed on screen.
And engagement goes up. Not just ratings.
Yeah. Engagement.
Yes.
And that's important. And like think of how we exploit our own players for any sport. The moment that something goes wrong. Like Michael Phelps is a good example. He was caught smoking weed and there was just the biggest fuss made about it. It was the biggest deal for something that was so small. So small.
No, you don't understand. He was imperiling America's youth.
Yes, obviously. But no, we use them for entertainment. They're there for our entertainment. So I like this idea of women who are already in this role of, well, you need to entertain and amuse and comply. Suddenly they're doing it physically as well in an arena.
And deceive.
Yep.
That was one of the ones that I was just like, oh, very well done. Because because it was such an interesting kind of sideways jab, because obviously a lot of this book talks about sort of the articulated feminist position, like this is what women think would be helpful for women across these very different strata. But one of the things that's kind of almost like I feel like a jab at the men's movement is when the two girls are like teaching everybody, or teaching, the reader ostensibly, how Megaton is played. And they're like, imagine how your man will swoon when you trick him into thinking that you give a shit about this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what men's rights movement, women deceive, women try to do this thing just to fuck with you and to ingratiate you. And so I just thought it was a nice little kind of like, like, we'll get that in there too. Like, let's talk about all of it, motherfuckers. Like,
and that's, again, I love that that's in there because of the God forbid a woman be interested in a thing or know as much as you do about a thing and not please you by making you feel the smartest or the best at whatever. My kid sister loves 49ers football. She used to be the head cheerleader in our high school on a constant basis. Constant. People who have known that she was into this for years, if she posts on Facebook about the Niners, there's always some jackass that goes, Kylie, you don't know. Or Kylie, you don't care.
Right,
Kylie, you
like
only care
can't
because.
Right.
And, you turn to my baby sister anytime in the fall. If you have a Skype call with her or something, it's late at night. She's in her Niners pajamas, things like that. Her husband is a Cowboys fan. They argue. But it's a beautiful, special thing that she shares with my dad. And my father is so charmingly defensive of her in that regard, to where even if my uncles want to try to rib on Kylie not knowing something about, football, because after all, she was a cheerleader, my dad will be like, really? Because Kylie and I were calling each other during the whole game, or really because Kylie, was sending me texts, or Kylie wanted to sit next to me, she would forego other things like time with her friends to watch football with my dad.
Yeah.
But she's still years and years and years of being a fan. Constantly people ask. Same with me, years of being a Sox fan. And it's like,
right. Well, I mean, I think unfortunately that's kind of like weird stealth anti-feminism, right? Like the fake geek girl phenomenon. Like, how can these women possibly know about Link and Mario and all of that sort of thing? And then, like, to the point where it's like the standards are exhaustively and demonstrably completely unparalleled to what you would expect a man to do. Like, I have never had another man in my life ask me, like, what obscure, like about, what the Konami code is, what the, like all of these obscure things that I have literally seen women attacked for as not being, quote, genuine game fans because they don't know the answers to, or genuine comic book fans because they don't know as much about the original Infinity War comic as I do. No one should know as much about even I don't think I should know as much about the original Infinity War comic as I do.
I work at a comic book shop. I still get people go, oh, do you read comic? Like, actually read them, or do you just watch the movies? And it's like, no, I just work here because I'm bored, and I'm just so after all that, like, geek boy dick.
Well,
damn, that's important.
Gail Simone. Wasn't it Gail Simone that just tweeted about how some fucker was trying to educate her on Deadpool in line for the Deadpool movie?
To be fair, her tweet was taken out of context. She said that does happen to her a lot. In that case, the guy didn't know who she was, and he was excited about it, and he wasn't being rude. He was just like, oh man, I love Deadpool. Deadpool's so cool. There's this run on Deadpool and then like starts describing her run on Deadpool. So it was
to her.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it wasn't that he was like being shitty. He was just really
like
excited.
Didn't know who he was talking to.
Yeah.
Oh,
so in that case, yeah.
That's a happy ending.
You do see that kind of gatekeeping and policing happen all the fucking time.
Yeah, in everything.
And I mean,
everything.
Yeah, and there is a large portion of businesses who would hire you because you're an attractive female, regardless of whether you care about the things that they want you to sell.
Right.
Yes,
but
like
that's
not.
also
it's really
diminishing.
not. It's really not as common as you think it might be.
Sorry, I'm really not trying to cut you off, Kaylee. I
You're
apologize. Just this. I have something to say about this. There's this gentleman named, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he made this very excellent point in my little corner of the universe about a year and a half ago. He had like a YouTube video or something that was basically like, geek men in particular love to feel aggrieved, right? Like there's enough of us who are in between 45 and 25 who remember what it was like to be in high school and have nobody appreciate how great it was that we played Magic, Dungeons and Dragons, played video games and did whatever. And of course at the time, like those colonies of people were very tightly knit together because we all had overlapping interests, which is not necessarily the case now. You could be a full-fledged video game person and not have a single fucking care in the world for any of that other stuff because there's so much of all of it. And that was this guy's point. He's like, you live in a world now where major corporations are pandering to you by putting the fucking Avengers on a movie screen. You are in a world now where there are beautiful women or men, whatever your fucking taste and flavor is, are walking around saying, hey, I think the Avengers link and or this other property of geek related thing is awesome and I want to spend time with you. And even if they're doing it because they either want to take your money or hop in your pants, what the fuck is your problem?
What is the complaint?
At what point do you need to feel so aggrieved that you must be like, well, I think this person's super hot and they're really cool, but it's not enough. Like, fuck off. Like, what more do you fucking want?
Well,
and I just,
see, I'm reminded of a time when every Magic the Gathering advertisement in my Pojo magazine, what was it called?
Yeah, I think it was Pojo.
Yeah. Had a picture of some big-titted woman holding hands of Magic cards. It's like, which will you choose?
Right. But to take your experience from 1997, or hell, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Not you specifically, but the concept. 2004, and still 12 years later, walk into, and in this case, in the case of Kaylee, a woman-owned and operated, primarily female, like 50 to 60% female staffed at this point, institution, and the first thing to be like is, you're just here to make my dick hard, right? What the fuck kind of privilege are you walking around with? You are no longer aggrieved. No one is waiting outside the comic book store to kick your ass. No one is waiting there being like,
for me.
Well, yeah, maybe. But you know what I mean? It's like you fucking won. Even the guys who are like, fucking sports rule. Let's make spreadsheets and pretend we like these guys on our team. It's like, so you're playing Dungeons and Dragons NFL edition. Fuck off. Like the days of nerd rage are fucking done, and it just
yeah, it so isn't 1998 anymore, and I'm like really done with this this trope that everything should be for your consumption and enjoyment. I have similar I see this all the time in game review things, that in this day and age, people are not 5 anymore, that maybe it's okay to actually talk about what you liked about something or to enjoy a thing, rather than seeing the achievements that somebody else did and trying to just find a way to tear them down, because you'll never be anything more than your mom's basement baby. I'm glad to see things like game journalism trying to advance. And I'm seeing a gesture that I think requires
you.
Yeah, but it's something that I think that when you're in a position that long, you get to the point that you're so threatened by things changing that you would rather be unhappy than face something new.
Yeah,
and that's what kind of fascinates me. I find it both pathetic and, I don't know. It's like I want to be mad at these people, but really I have this confused sort of pity, because it's like children that have been wanting to sit in the corner. You know, they get put in the corner and they'll stay there once mom says it's time to come out, because they want the whole world to see how they've been discriminated against. Mm-hmm. High school is over.
Let's
grow up.
Let's talk about intersectional feminism for a moment here to change the topic
again.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I was watching this video on YouTube not too long ago showing a retrospective history of video game advertisements.
Oh my God. Talk about...
And specifically showing that back in the 70s, video game advertisements specifically focused on the family. Families playing video games together. Mom, dad, kids. All there together enjoying games together.
I think I watched this video.
By the 80s, there was a shift. Video games were focusing increasingly on kids playing games by themselves. Mom and dad are gone. Round about 89 to 92, there was a very significant, very notable shift again, specifically advertising video games to boys and young men. Like you could see, like first boys, and then as the 90s went on, young men and then teenagers, but specifically targeting this demographic, saying, this is for you. This is yours. No one else allowed. Look at all the hot chicks you're going to get playing video games. You're so cool. You're so manly. You're so awesome. Buy this shit. And we talk about the systems of control that are woven through the society that tell you you have to act in a certain way. And we have an entire generation of men, many of whom are now in their 30s, even their 40s, who are fucking raised on this garbage, who identify with it and have built their lives and their identities around a product that was sold to them. And it's very, very difficult for them to change that. And as much as they may offend us with their infantile and puerile actions, you also have to have a certain sense of pity towards them. And I think that there does need to be a sense of not necessarily disdain or hatred, but of correction, of saying, look, this is not appropriate behavior. This diminishes all of us, and we need to fix it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are the same people I was talking about, how they've been, all these years, like, I don't want to say lied to about, like, but
they were given a very specific
over-sexualizing advertising and products. And so when they walk into, let's say, a comic book store, they think that the women there are there to sell you comics because they're hot and not because they actually read or are knowledgeable about comics.
Well, I think in that case, it's a pure disconnect between reality and marketing.
There absolutely is.
And so it's hard to be like, I do feel sorry for you. Let me educate you. Because there's a certain point where it's like, no, you need to fucking accept that the world does not work the way that your TV says it does. And you should have grown out of that when you were 5.
You've just had the privilege of not having to confront reality as long as people who live in it.
I want to say one thing real quick.
Yeah.
So for the video game thing, my brothers never really played video games. We had a Dreamcast growing up.
Good choice.
Yep. Best system that was ever made. Fight me.
Love the system. controller.
Fight me.
Hey,
so we had a Dreamcast, and we played pretty much primarily Omnicron, and Crazy Taxi, and then there was like a flight simulator. Those were like our 3 main games that we played on the Dreamcast. Other than that, they didn't really play. And usually when we did play this game, we kind of played it together, like with a flight simulator, because we were idiots and stupid. We were like, oh, well, we're going to sit up on the bed. One of us is going to be the pilot, and that's the one with the controller. And the other 2 of us will be the passenger, and we'll sit behind them on the bed. And we'll pretend like we're on a plane together, and that will be the game. Isn't this fun? And of course, our mom loved it because she had all 3 of us sitting quietly, pretending that we were on an airplane for like an 8-hour flight. So she's like, this is great. Perfect. But I cannot tell you the amount of shit that they get when they tell some, like, a grown man, when they start talking about, like, oh, I should play Fallout, and they're like, oh, I don't play. And it's just this instant, like, violent reaction, like, what the fuck do you mean you don't play? Like, what do you play? And it's nothing. I don't play video games at all. Like, I don't care. I played a little bit of Portal once, and that was that. So I think just as much as it's like this idea of women are excluded, there's also this idea of men have to be included, like by default.
Oh yeah.
You have to know the thing.
You have to know the thing. If you don't know the thing, then there's something wrong with you. And that's, yeah, it's gross.
Well, that actually brings us a little, well, my thought is we were talking about sports earlier. And that's actually also kind of the thing, is growing up as a male, I was expected to play sports. Even if I didn't want to, I had to play sports, and I had to be the best, or as the best I could, in order to be accepted. And it's like, well, no, I want to, after school, go to the comic book shop and play Magic the Gathering with my friends, but nope, that's not allowed. You have to play football. And it's just like,
yeah, it's gender policing, straight up.
I guess as far as the sport thing goes in this book, I also have to bring around the idea that in the feminist conversation of having sport in there, I think it also serves to add in that idea that in order for a woman to be a strong woman and a valid woman and like a good example of a woman, she has to be able to do everything that men do. Mm-hmm. That there is this really strange kind of damaging idea that a woman has to be able to do everything a man does to either be a real feminist or to be worthy of being considered equal by people on the top. It's another one of those really complicated, interesting tightrope things where everybody, again, geek community wants the girl that knows all the video games that you play, that cares about those things that you care about, that, you know, is as into those things as you, but never shows you up on it. Mm-hmm. Or similarly, but she can't just be into those things. She's also got to be hot. She's also got to check all these certain boxes for you. And in that sport element in that, I find that another important reason, I guess, for the sport is the idea that if it is a men's sport, you have to prove that you are worth your freedom or that you are worth, re-entering society because men make the rules of society. Yeah. The rubric is men in this story. And similarly, in our world, it's kind of the same thing, is that there is that type of feminism that espouses this idea that you are not strong or worth it on your own, or that your interests or activities are not worthy of respect on their own unless they align with this party line of what strength looks like.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important too, like to tag on to that, when they're discussing the option of playing Megaton and like what they would have to do. The first issue that is brought up is, well, how can we win? Like, oh, there's no way that we can get like 2,000 tons worth of players. And it's like, well, we're going to have to play differently. So they're not only going to have to be better than this other team, but they're going to have to reinvent how they play, which is something that women constantly face, where it's like, not only do you have to be better, you have to do it in such a novel and unique way that nobody can show you up on it. that you cannot fail.
You have to have a response for all the rebuttals before it comes out of someone's mouth. And that's why you got to have penny roll in this, is that both for the experience of intersectionality and for their game to work, you cannot win this game without including everyone and all different types of people. And so I just had to throw in the thing of how important penny roll is, because fat phobia is still a really real thing in feminist circles and other places because of things like that. And then a black woman on top of everything else who likes herself, including her size, is probably the single most terrifying thing that we could imagine in our white, straight, thin society. It's the most transgressive thing you could imagine. So
I penny roll, actually, because I love that character so much. I love this work, and I was honestly kind of terrified to discuss it tonight, because it's one of those things where it's like, I love it. I'm worried that I'm not going to sound smart enough when I discuss it. So I read reviews to psych myself out. And so one of the reviews I was reading just pissed me off. And they rated the book 5 stars. All that good stuff. Oh, it's great, it's great, it's great. Penny Roll is a sassy black woman.
Oh boy.
And who, like, big, beautiful, black, all this shit, right? And it's like, no, you don't understand. She's not that. She's a fantastic character. She's a person. And by describing her that way, I think how they used it was, Penny Roll is a big, sassy black woman, and then in parentheses wrote, which is a stereotype, I know, but that's how she's written. And then, like, goes on. It's like, no, she's not a stereotype. You just boxed her in
like that.
No, not at all. You cut parts of her out so that she could fit into a box for you, which is the whole issue with this idea of being compliant. Because if Penny Roll was just a big, sassy black woman, she probably would not have been labeled non-compliant. Right?
She would have been a mammy.
She would have been, like, they had, like, that really grotesque conversation between the two men about, like, oh, well, you know, some of them like it that way. Like, they like them that big or whatever. Yeah. And it was just, it was gross, and it was objectifying and all this. But clearly, big women have a role in this society, right? Because some of them are desirable by men. The problem with Penny Roll is that she's not complacent. She is not just sassy, big, and beautiful. She's a troublemaker. She fights. She is disobedient. She is obstinate. She is all of these great, fascinating things. She has this family story that you just want to know so much more about. And for somebody to cut that off, it feels like you just cut off her limbs and, like, shoved her into a box and was like, this is who she is now because that's how I like her to be.
It's palatable.
Yeah. And it felt disgusting. And you can see with all of these characters, like, how that could happen. And I think it really does a disservice to the writing and to the art because they're not made that way. These characters aren't stereotypes. They are real characters. They have motivations and feelings and stories and backgrounds and all these great things. But when you read it, you have this tendency, or some people do, have this tendency to just kind of disregard everything so that they can find them palatable.
Well, Penny Roll's story, the issue that covers her story, is a really fantastic one because of how well it outlines the multiple degrees and shades of transgression that the character is. I really, really love that she's not only cool with her appearance and her size and things like that, but she actively bucks against the idea that she shouldn't be. And that seeing how it affects people around her, she makes a pretty conscious choice of, I'm not going to become that woman. Yeah. I'm not going to be that insecure, unhappy woman. I'm not going to be that person that's constantly struggling to be something for someone who doesn't appreciate me, or people who don't really care about me unless I am the kind of me that is easy for them to deal with. And I don't know, that particular issue was a really special thing, I guess, to read
Mm-hmm.
because of how her experience, again, with the intersectionality thing, it's got some very specific markers of what types of oppression she faces, but the way in which that issue is told is so universal to other women and their experience that it's also a really good rallying cry for feminists who don't face the same experience as her, because you also have to have the empathetic experience of being like, see, this happens to her and that makes me feel awful for her, but the reality is we kind of keep letting this happen to ourselves too.
Yeah.
And someone like her saying that she's not going to let the status quo be the status quo makes you kind of go, she has more to deal with than I have to deal with. So why am I sitting on my ass? You know, going back to your previous thought, Kaylee, about these books being about, you say you're a feminist, you say you care about these issues, so why aren't you doing more?
Mm-hmm.
That, I think that issue is so important to have in there, where you have a person with all of those things against her who just doesn't give a fuck about that.
Yeah.
That she's like, I'm ready for people not to like me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready for that to be a problem.
Well, I also, Meiko? Is that how you say
Meiko.
her?
Meiko.
Her issue 6, which I believe we put the trigger warning out
Yes.
for. Good.
That was included.
Good.
And I'll put another one at the top of this episode.
Okay. For those who have not checked it or read this issue yet, there's a trigger warning. There is sexual abuse of a minor, and it's important to this character, but you can skip this issue if you are uncomfortable or if you feel like that is not something that you can process or want to expose yourself to. Currently, you can skip issue 6 and just go straight to issue 7 and pick up exactly where you left off at the end of issue 5. But in this issue, I think it's important in how she's portrayed, because you have this white man who comes in and is just all of those gross, like, oriental fetishization sort of things that happen with Japanese culture, where he comes to like dinner dressed in a kimono, and he like does all these like weird not rituals that he kind of invented or like read about or whatever to this basically American family, and they're just like, what the fuck are you doing? And then he sexually abuses their youngest daughter.
Does he actually abuse her?
Well,
he's kind of gearing up for it, right? Like tricks her, or convinces her to show up, or at least he thinks he does, and then she kind of
well, then she murders him. But I think it's important because in that case too, it's easy to say that she's a stereotype, like, oh, she's smart and she will do anything for her family,
and she's a ninja.
Yeah, and she's a ninja, and like all the gross things, right? Just gross stereotypes about Asian cultures that people just kind of go like Asian and smush it all into one person and go, that's you. And she's not that. And I think that that's important. And you have all these other characters that are just, they're full, they're fleshed out, and they're real. And I really want to stress the importance of like not stereotyping them. And I think issue 3 and issue 6 do a really good job of fleshing out these characters. And I'm excited for the next character issue that they do.
I just wanted to kind of throw in there how much respect I have for the art generally. Who's the main artist for the series?
Valentine Delandro. For Valentine Delandro, as well as I think Robert Wilson IV, who does the Mako issue. He does the penny roll.
Penny roll issue. Who does the Mako issue?
I have it written down. Taki Soma.
Okay. I'm not going to try and say that again, because without looking at it, I'm going to butcher that name. But I love the art in this series, specifically because of how much female nudity there is in this, and how at no point is it ever sexy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is both a positive for the series in terms of the artistic point that it's making, but also an artistic accomplishment. Like, people sexualize a lot of shit that shouldn't be sexualized, and they've managed to present something that is really, really not in any way sexy, despite having a lot of naked female bodies in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really just applauding them for accomplishing something that is obviously very, very difficult. And I know in at least one issue, it was delayed because they had to redraw like a 3-page scene a bunch of times to get it just right.
Issue 3 with the shower sex scene, they redrew it, I believe, 3 times, and delayed the issue, but it was worth it. Like, as a reader, it was absolutely worth it, because I think they just did such an excellent job. And Delandro's art, just in general, I really love, and it's one of those things that keeps me like waiting with bated breath for the series to come out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because his art is just so fantastic, and he adds so much. I was lucky enough to go to a panel with a lot of the creators for Bitch Planet, and Kelly was discussing how there are certain things that he would add in to backgrounds that she never really explicitly wrote, but he just kind of added, and how much that brought to the characters. Like, there's a whole fight scene that happens as what is her as Kamau is talking to Mako. Like, they're kind of talking, they're talking on the treadmill, so and they're running, and that's in the front, and in the back you can see Pennyroll get confronted by a guard, and then swing at the guard, and then 2 more guards come up, and then another prisoner jumps into the fight, and then there's just all these guards, and there's just massive brawl happening in the background of this conversation between 2 people.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
It's fantastic, and he's added so much to this, and just, this is a creative team, I think, that's just absolutely fantastic. And the colors, which is done by issues 1 through 5 were Chris Peter, and then 6 and 7 were done by Kelly Fitzpatrick. And the colors are so like vibrant and saturated at the same time, and it's fantastic.
Kelly Fitzpatrick sounds familiar. I feel like I read something else recently that she's done. I'm gonna have to look into that. But yeah, like, it's one of those situations where it's hard to say a lot about it, because it's operating on such a seamless level where it all feels incredibly natural. Mm-hmm. It tells the story in such an understandable way. Like, there's very little where you can go, oh, I didn't like this, or I thought that this could have been better, or I was confused by this thing. Like, it's all so clear on the page, and it does such a great job of conveying the story that it's hard to really speak critically of it. And I don't mean like badly, but just on a critical level, really examine it, because it's like, yeah, it's amazing. It's so good, and I love everything that it's doing.
Yeah, and it does like, just the art and panel layouts and everything, just such an excellent job of kind of making the I can't remember her name right, the nun, the hologram lady, the holographic nun. I
wanted to talk about her.
They do such an excellent job of making her so gross. She is the ideal of everything that is sexy and hot and totally perfect for male gaze, and she is disgusting and awful to look at. She's grotesque, and I just think that that's amazing that they were able to pull that off.
Okay, now I don't want to ask my question anymore. Because you just said it was grotesque, which I agree with. But at the very beginning, when she's first introduced, when she's got the big hair and the red lipstick, looks reminiscent of Kelly Sue to me. Not in level of attractiveness, because I think that she's a very nice looking lady, but just in general style.
Well, and that's a lot of it too. Her style is supposed to fluctuate.
Right.
And match different ideals. So
right. And it was just in that first appearance. When I first read it, I was like, "Oh, that looks like Kelly Sue."
Right,
and I wondered if that was intentional or not, or if anybody else got that.
I didn't get that so much, but it was like it's a very retro makeup style.
Yes.
And that's kind of an ideal, like that 50s style of beauty. Same with like being a hot, sexy nun is an ideal of beauty. Things like that, and so it's fantastic. It's so well done, and I really, really enjoy the series.
Samesies. Did anybody else?
I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. Did anybody else have anything else that they wanted to add, or other topics that they wanted to hit before we moved on?
I do have one thing. I don't know how much we need to talk about it. I mean, not that I'm not encouraging it, but before the show, I was asking Kaylee to what extent back matter was included in the graphic novel formatting that has been released so far, and we determined that at least some of the essays that are provided in each issue will be in the hardcover.
That's what I've heard.
But I really found reading the single issues of this is a really interesting exercise in considering a piece of work in its time and place, but not only that, talking a little bit or seeing it as also a really interesting commentary on the natures of what comics can achieve, or what monthly comics actually can achieve as an art form, and maybe why there's still value in perpetuating the monthly comic, because I know that we've talked a lot about us maybe not necessarily feeling like that's necessary. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it has to do with the nature of the correspondence. Like the essays are timely to the specific issues. The letters by Kelly Sue are specific to the things that she's grappling with as she writes each successive piece. But also even the correspondence with people indicates kind of this ongoing dialogue between the readers and the writers and other creators, to the extent that even I think I thought it was issue 5, maybe it's issue 6. I couldn't find it, and I don't want to get into reading it because that's going to take too long. But basically, a guy writes in and says, I love your book, I love all these things, but the one thing I don't like is that it feels like you're basically man-bashing all men, and I don't try to do that. And it wasn't Kelly Sue, it was one of the other creators or folks who work with them. Maybe one of the other essayists basically said, yeah, that's nice, but you're actually part of the problem when you think that way. And goes into all of these very sophisticated arguments about, but the arguments themselves are sophisticated as in complex, but the language used was very simplistic, and I thought really just hammered these points home, talking about even a man who's experienced some of the things that this guy claims to have had still has these other things. And of course, it came up earlier when we were talking about it, but there's always that cliche that, Ginger Rogers has to do everything that Frank Sinatra does, but backwards.
Fred Astaire.
Or Fred Astaire, excuse me.
But backwards
and in heels. And she says, except you also have to consider that, like, one of her legs is shorter because she doesn't have adequate health care. Her heels are dilapidated because she doesn't have enough money. Like, she's like, actually, it's Ginger Rogers is doing all of these things, plus all of these things, plus these things, and is still actually dancing. So, yes, you may have had these experiences, but keep in mind they're still different than what women are going through. And so I feel like this is one of those things that, unless there gets to be editions where literally every piece of content that a single issue has in it is maintained and kept with the heart of its narrative, there's nothing is going to be as complete of an experience as the individual issues. And I don't think that that's always the case for every comic. Like most comics, it's like, I loved when you wrote that part where Star-Lord rode on a giant dinosaur. It's like that doesn't add anything to the narrative. But there's some really interesting conversations happening in this book in the back matter, and I think that it's if for people who really want to get into this topic and really understand it, not just what the narrative is talking about, but all of the stuff that the narrative is dragging up, these questions we feel like it's forcing people to ask themselves. This is a really good place to start, these single issues. So,
yeah, absolutely. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about specifically related to Bitch Planet?
My final take on the book. I recently watched Kill Bill, thanks to Kit. It was my first time watching it. reading Bitch Planet feels like watching The Bride the entire time, where you're just rooting for her and you're so proud of her and you're just so excited. And not only would her succeeding mean victory for her, or in this case, their succeeding mean victory for them, but also means triumph over these issues. And so you're rooting for them both as a spectator and as somebody who is actively involved and being affected by these issues.
Yeah, I think that that's very salient and poignant. And I think that this is a book that is going to be significant for many years to come. And so for anybody out there who's listened to this conversation and has not read it, my God, what are you doing with your life? Go out and get it. Read it. It's good. It's so good. I mean, we've been talking about a lot of weighty stuff here, but underneath all of the social commentary, there's a really well-written, well-executed story here that is well worth your time.
Mm-hmm.
It's real good. Also, Image has finally done something that we've been clamoring about on this show for a while, and that is on their website, the digital versions of trades are now cheaper than the physical ones. So the first volume of this is only $8 if you buy the digital.
That is a exceptionally reasonable price.
Yeah. So I can't wait for volume 2 to come out. I'm going to grab that digital version.
Awesome. So did we have any comments, questions, or reactions to old episodes that we wanted to talk about?
We had a listener question. Did you want to address that one, Kit?
Yeah, I kind of do.
Okay.
Wasn't it the sheep?
Yes,
did we get sheeped? That's what I thought.
Yeah, I have it right here if you want to read it.
Yeah, if I may. We done got sheeped. And
that charming, wonderful sheep.
Yeah, Sheeb asked us which character we think represents the real life experiences that women experience in prison and life in general. I think that's an important question to answer. And I think it's an interesting question for a lot of reasons. We keep talking about or saying things about intersectionality. And as a person who's been in a position to speak about this particular thing, I wanted to say something about that. The things that you see about jail on TV are maybe not exactly it, particularly in the case with women. I'm a big watcher of Orange is the New Black, and I enjoy it. I see there are a lot of problems with it, too, even with the stuff that I do enjoy. But one of the things that interests me in these sort of stories about women in prison and things like that is the tendency for people to want to continue to write women in a position like that as outwardly aggressive, constantly competitive, and just chip on their shoulder all the time. And Kelly's thing of putting this whole non-compliance thing onto women and putting women in prison adds a further layer of this, I guess, because for some reason we are interested and delighted in the idea of women being in prison and us watching them. Couldn't imagine why that is. So I think that one of the things I wanted to say about this book is that it seems there is more of a tendency in this book to reflect the collaborative nature of living in jail or in prison that actually goes down in jail or in prison. In interest of disclosure, I spent a very, very short amount of time, like one evening after an indiscretion, and I was helped by way more people than I ever expected. They always talk about these sort of situations and these scare tactic kind of ways to intimidate kids out of making poor decisions. And I understand why that is. The reality is I saw none of that. I saw a community and an environment where women shared and supported each other because of mutual suffering, that it gets better when you work together, I guess. People sharing each other's shampoo when they didn't have anything. Someone got me a pencil and a piece of paper. I was having a really rough day. People sharing commissary money, phone times, things like that. To get more toward the book, though, one of the things I really liked in the experience of reading this book is how quickly women worked together and how different that is from the usual tendency to try to put women in stories like this in a stressful and difficult situation and sit back and, quote, enjoy the cat fight because you have a bunch of bad bitches and, oh God, they're going to talk like it's high school and my God, they're just going to tear each other apart and you're going to be so entertained because we love seeing women hurt each other because that gives us a reason to hurt women, because they're deceptive, they're aggressive, they're all bitches on the inside, which means it's okay for me to call them a bitch. His question is asking for a specific person, and I don't really think that that's possible for the further reason that many people that you don't think would have been in jail or in prison have been in jail or in prison. And a lot of that is for the reason that many people are thrown into a situation like that because we are overzealous about who goes to jail and who goes to prison in the United States. That's a weird way to answer that question, but I guess I'm thinking more along the lines that Kelly Sue did a pretty great job writing about the collaborative nature of prison life. That's a really roundabout thing, but I would like to ask anybody else if they have any thoughts on any individual characters, I guess.
I know that my experience is limited in this, as my experience with jail has been secondhand accounts from family members, Orange is the New Black, and reading articles. I have not been in jail, surprisingly. Most of my family members I've spent time in jail or in prison have been male. So that being said, I am speaking from a place of some inexperience. From what I do know, and my limited frame of reference, I think I'd have to echo a lot of what Kit is saying, where there is this tendency, especially in mainstream media, to kind of pitch women against each other. And we see it in Orange is the New Black, where you have like these different factions, these different groups, and everybody's out to get each other. And there's a lot of really hot lesbian sex going on, and it's great. The reality is that women know that they get the short end of the stick. And women in prison know that. And they're not going to take somebody else's stick and make it even shorter. Not if they can help it. And I think that really does speak to this collaborative nature, this sort of nature of, look, it's shitty. We might get into fights. We might have factions. But I'm not going to go out of my way to tear you down just so I can feel a little bit better about myself. And I really appreciate this work for that.
Cool beans. I did want to talk about one other thing very briefly before we wrap up, which is that Robbie Rodriguez has announced that after the next arc of Spider-Gwen, he is going to be retiring from comic books. And I did not hear it specifically from him, but what my understanding is that he is doing this for health reasons. And I just wanted to express, as an artist whose work I've greatly enjoyed, that I'm really going to miss him as a ongoing comics creator.
Absolutely.
And if it is health related, I wish him all the best in his future health. And I hope that he gets better. So
now
Absolutely.
I did have one other thing that I just wanted to point out. Our a really scary fact from this book that I had to double check. Although they quoted the source in here, in one of the ads in it says that between the years of 2002 and 2012, more American women have been killed or murdered in a domestic dispute than the number of Americans killed on 9/11 and the Afghanistan war combined.
Yep.
That is scary
by
as
a
shit.
large margin.
This is the power of narrative and tone setting and tone policing in the broadest of senses. Like, we literally spend billions of dollars because what is statistically, no offense to anyone, a statistically trivial event happened one day in New York. Yes, it hurt our feelings, it scared us, it did all these things, and we have basically, engaged in like this crazy set of the circumstances. Like, we talk about the crazy toll of the wars that we have fought, but when you look at the numbers of how many of the men and women who have been sent to fight that have died compared to any of our other major armed conflicts, the only thing that's crazy about it is the amount of money that we've spent and how long we've been doing it. But the number of people who've actually been injured, harmed, or killed, not that their experiences are trivial, but when you compare it, the number of people who die from poverty, the number of people who die from disease, the number of domestic abuse stuff, it's just like we have but those are not things that we need to spend our time and energy fixing, because out there is somebody who probably has skin that's not as white as most of us. Some of us might be trying to hurt us.
Well, it's just weird. Not weird, but it makes you think. Like, it's one of those facts that make people scared to come to America to see the Olympics. Like, they hear about our domestic violence, our daily mass shootings. That's domestic terrorism. The thing that happened in Oregon a few weeks ago. And it's like, all this shit does happen in America, and it's like, just...
Yeah. No, it's a shock to the system when something like that is put into stark relief for you. And again, I think that's one of the important things of works like this, is that it can call to your attention something which is part of the stew that we boil in daily, and you may not notice in your day-to-day life, but when something can actually stir things up and really bring something like that to your attention, it's an important thing, and it deserves to be recognized.
It's just scary.
Yeah. Well, don't let it paralyze you in your life, but acknowledge it and be ready and willing to do something about it when the power to do so comes to you. At least that's all I can say right here and right now. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap things up. So for next week, it's going to be my pick. And I have picked Alex and Ada by Sarah Vaughan and Jonathan Luna. This is a 15-issue series. It's printed in 3 graphic novels by Image, and it is a robot romance. Specifically, it is a world set, I think, about 30, 40 years in the future, about 15 to 20 years after the world's first sentient AI was created, and then immediately went on a rampage and killed like 100 people. And after this, a law was passed saying that no robot could be made sentient. But they still manufacture non-sentient robots who are able to respond to humans. They're everything but self-aware. And the story is about this guy who is given such a robot by his grandmother and is kind of weirded out by it at first, and kind of starts to learn more about it and finds out that the only reason that these robots aren't sentient is that they've had a blocker installed that prevents them from achieving sentience. But everything for them to be completely self-aware people is there in the hardware. And that some people have been essentially jailbreaking their robots to give them sentience. And he struggles with the concept of doing this, and he ultimately decides to go forward with it, and so creates a person. And the series is about his relationship with this girl that he is responsible for having created, and her struggling with her sentience and coming to understand her place in the world and their relationship. It's a really interesting series. It's one that I struggled with the ending a bit, and so I'm really eager to hear what other people have to say. And it's got robot sexy times, and who doesn't love that? So that is Alex and Ada, which I will look forward to talking to all of you about next week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the live stream, and we will see you all soon.
Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This has been a production of View from the Gutters. Thank you to this month's show sponsors, Jeb Corzelius, Mike, Jeremy Ballard, Curfy Gonzo, Tony Cortero, Addison Appleby, Brian May, Becca Lewandowski, and Shopping Mall Krampus. We hope you'll join us next time for discussion of our selected title. In the meantime, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Become a sponsor of the show at patreon.com/viewfromthegutters. Like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we upload old episodes, as well as video content including panels and other events. Or leave us a review on iTunes, as it does help new listeners find the show. We encourage you to send any questions, comments, or recommendations you may have to contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep reading.